Hello everyone, welcome back to Ansarkari. So starting with the next important topic, which would be all about taxation in India. So we'll start with the micro understanding and then we'll be taking it to the next level. So the word tax, it means to assess the worth of something. So in India, we different types of taxations are there. Taxes there on your income which you are earning. There are indirect taxes also if you're buying something. So you have to pay GST, which is again an indirect taxation. Then there is wealth taxation, there is gift tax. So all of that is there. So that is again to assess the worth of something. So suppose there is luxury goods. So the amount of taxation would be higher on that. Or suppose there is something a basic good. For example, newspapers, we are not taxing that under GST. So that is the worth. The taxation, or we can say newspaper, is very important. You can't tax much upon that. So it is, uh, uh, in a way, we are assessing the worth of the newspaper or the luxury goods. So the power of living tax, Article 265 of the Indian Constitution, and the only authority of the law according to law which has the power to levy and collect the taxes is the state, or we can say the government. So it is not the private sector which can tax or which can actually tax for its own purpose. Even that amount gets transferred to the government. So why do we tax? The funds which are collected through taxation, it is important for the functioning of the government machinery. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult without finances, without money to function and to actually make policies or execute things. So it becomes a duty of every citizen to pay the tax. So whatever amount or the income it is taxed, the entire amount goes into the consolidated fund of India as per Article 266 of the Indian Constitution. And then we also talked about this in detail during the when we were discussing about the budget, that how this money is then taken out from the consolidated fund of India. We require the approval and the permission of the parliament. And taxes are imposed by the government for the use and the service of the state for governance. So for governance, it is important. The government has the sufficient amount of finances with it. So what is the significance of taxation? Provides revenue to the state. This is the most significant aspect to carry out administrative functions. Then it can propel the economic growth of the country and lead to its prosperity, because again, the fiscal policy of the government, the entire amount, even the budget, you say that a dedicated amount goes for particular scheme or for different ministries or the defense budget. So entire amount comes from, we can say not entire, but yes, there is fiscal deficit also, but a major portion is collected through taxes. And then efficient taxation policy leads to growth in the GDP also, and considered sound if it performs allocative. So growth of the GDP for economic growth, for equitable, sustainable growth, the amount of the taxation is important for stabilization function. So pure theory of law by Hans Kelsen. It is based on the ground norm or the ground rule, that is an assumed norm that provides legitimacy and power to the other legal norms. And optimal taxation, what should be the optimal taxation amount? This is again a whole debate in itself. Determination of the tax policies, as we are also talking, key, there are again debates about GST rate rationalization, how many tax rates should be there, whether how many numbers of taxation rates should be there, and what should be their exact rate. So that is again a debate. So that's there are four general requirements for efficient administration of tax laws. What should it should be? It should be we need to be clear with them. Why we are taxing this particular amount only, even when we talk about the income tax also. It needs to be stable. You can't change it every now and then, and it needs to continue for a longer time period. It needs to be cost effective at the same time, and convenient also, even for the people, convenient to pay it, and also convenience in the terms that amount is also convenient for the people. So it is in, we can say, in relation or in proportion to the income of the people also. Now we'll start with the historical element. What was the idea of taxation in ancient India, how it has evolved? So we have Earth Shastra, Kautilya's Earth Shastra. It is a treatise on the economics and governance. So there are, it also talks about taxation, revenue administration, or the different types of taxes which were imposed back then, and how at that point of time we had an efficient tax system. Then Manusmriti, which is the law of Manus, it also talks about duties and responsibility of the kings when it comes to imposition, the collection of the taxes. So it also warns against excessive taxation because it can again lead to the downfall of a kingdom. Excessive taxation, that you start taxing everything and the amount of taxation. So it can become again, it can backfire also. Third is Dharma Shastras, the text of the Dharma. So here it also touches upon taxation, although it is like about Dharma. So it says that the significance of taxation for the well-being of society and suggest that taxes should be collected without causing undue hardship to the taxpayers. So these are different, we can say, qualitative elements which have been mentioned in ancient India and the different texts that we have. And talk about formal taxation system. This was in existence in India from the time of the modern empire. So this becomes an important fact. Proper formal system of taxation had a beginning from the modern empire. And Kautilya's concept of taxation is more or less akin to the modern system of taxation. So we can say that it is influenced from the ideas of Kautilya's. What was his ideas of taxation? So it laid emphasis on equity and justice, and there is fine on tax evasion also. So even this element is also mentioned in his by him or in his Arthashastra also. So as we talk about even today's times, we discuss about progressive and regressive taxation. So we can say even that has some kind of origins from back then. Then here we have the terms ancient India mein what were the different types of taxes imposed. So these directly asked in prelims, like Sita, it is a profits from standing land. Bali is a religious tax. Kar is the taxes paid in cash. So we can just go through them quickly, and these are very important for prelims. Coming to now medieval India. So at that point of time, we saw that taxation system, it became normal. It was highly structured. Revenue system was there, which was designed by Alauddin Khilji. So here, 4/5 of the war spoils from his soldiers. So he demanded this much amount. And Ghari was a tax on houses, and so like we have in today's time property tax. So even then also we had taxes on houses. Chara was tax on grasslands. As we talk about this word chara, it is related to grazing. So used for grazing of the lands. Grazing of animals were introduced by Alauddin Khilji. So even on these basic things, there were taxation. So Indian taxation system during the medieval times, it was majorly land revenue, also known as kharaj. So all these terms are very important. Firstly, kisht and kharaj. So these were different taxes. Their value varied between 1/4 and 1/6 of the produce. And as we also talk about, land revenue has been one of the major topics of debate and even issues during the modern times also, when we saw the East India Company's rule in India. Then talking about Sher Suri, so he introduced taxation system and it was reformed by Akbar, was a Mughal ruler. And from 1580s onward, we had the Dhasala system, which was again, Dhasala is for 10 years. So it was again during the reign of Akbar, it was used to collect the tax revenues as 1/3 of the average produce, as it is mentioned, for 10 years to ensure successful, efficient revenue system. And later then talk about Marathas and Shivaji. So he abolished Jagir and the Zamindari system, established direct contact to the cultivators by fixed at 40% taxation on the total produce. So at that point of time, taxation, it was not important that you have to pay a certain tax in the form of money. It can be also, it was actually in the form of percentage of your total produce for the farmers, or the zamindari system that we talk about. So 40% of your total harvest had to be paid in the form of the tax. Then Chauth, as we talk about, it is 1/4 of the land revenue which was paid. Sardesh Mukhi was an additional levy of 10% on the similar lands. So it is in the context of Marathas. Chauth and Sardesh Mukhi collected not in the Maratha kingdom but in the neighboring territories of Mughal Empire or the Deccan Sultanate at that point of time. Now we talk about the taxation system in the Chalukya dynasty, the Cholas, and the Vijayanagara Empire. So there they also again had a well-organized taxation system. and which helped them to finance their administration, military activities, and rate of land revenue varied between again 1/4 and 1/6 of the total produce. And apart from land revenues, Chalukyas, Cholas, Vijayanagara, they also collected taxes on various goods also, like textiles, spices, and metals. So you can say these were again an example of indirect taxation at that point of time, apart from direct taxes. And then tolls were also paid at that point of time. Tolls like we have to pay even today for the roads and the bridges that we use. So, or even on infrastructure. So these can be taken up. So examples, these are the elements which we have today also. So Chalukya dynasty and Chola, they were well organized, helped to maintain strong, stable kingdoms and even their army. And unique system of taxation, this is important. Kudavolai. So this was a system followed by Cholas. Kudavolai, it was a tax on crown land which was used to finance the maintenance of irrigation system, and it was essential for the agriculture in South India. So here crown land would be the, we can say, the land owned by, I think, the king. So even king was paying this form of tax, if I am correct to interpret this, and that amount was used for the maintenance for development of the irrigation system. So even king, as a, we can say, the citizen or as a responsible person, he also was obliging with his duty as far as taxation was concerned. So Oshik, you can just correct me if I'm interpreting this to be the right way. Crown land पे जो taxation था,
True है मंजी.
ठीक है. Then Vijayanagar Empire also imposed a tax on the gold. So this was called Honu Dike. And it was also a unique system of taxation which is called Nadu Mandal to finance the administration. So these terms are important. These can directly come up. So there are three important terms: Koda Volai, Onudike, and Nadu Mandal. Then again, certain types, the examples with the words Kharaj, Ushraf, Zakat, Jizya, it was on the religious basis, tax levied on non-Muslims and the non-followers of Islam. Khums was there, Sharab by Firoza Tughlaq. So these are different names and the types: Zarib, Ikta system we talk, Khalisa lands, Fazwal. Now coming to modern India and the taxation system. So the tax was first introduced in 1860 by Sir James Wilson with the intention to meet the losses sustained by the governments due to the military mutiny of 1857. So this was for the very first time in modern India we saw taxation being imposed. And in 1918, new income tax. So income tax, we can say in formal sense, had its beginning in 1918, and it was substituted by another act just passed in 1922, and it remained in operation up to the assessment of 1961-62 with several amendments. Then Warren Hastings, he also had the role. So the Panch Sala settlement. So he started the system where the highest bidder was given the right to collect the rent. And then there was annual system also. Revenue board was also there dedicatedly to collect the tax revenue. Permanent settlement system, we talk about Rohatwari and then Mehelwaris. So these also formed a part of land revenue. And with this, Aikar means the income tax day. So that was also celebrated. So he introduced income tax, Sir James Wilson. Income tax, Aikar Divas, we can remember this. And in July 2010, we acknowledged 150 years of income tax in India, stating the importance of paying income tax. So these were the different years when income tax acts were passed. Current income tax act, it has been adopted in 1961. So here also we can talk about decolonization and the amendments even required in this income tax act of 1961. So it encompasses whole of India, including Sikkim, Jammu and Kashmir also. And we right now we have CBDT, which is okay, the Central Board of Revenue. It was bifurcated and created a separate board for the direct taxes. We talk about CBDT under the aegis of Central Board of Revenue Act. So this is for, like, we are having it differently for the direct and the indirect taxes. So certain main features of this act are mentioned. There were exemptions of the earnings from agriculture produced from the taxation, and even today also, agriculture sector is not taxed in India. Premiums which are payable for the life insurance and Hindu undivided family, they were addressed as separate taxable units. Income tax of 1918, certain again features of this. The receipts and the deductions, the casual non-occurring nature were also incorporated in the competition. So these are not so important things. You can just look for the unique features. 1990, 1922 Act, we'll talk about this. So here, income from the earnings from business profession, capital gains, house property, and other sources. These were made a part of 1961 Act. So before 1991, the overall tax structure tha, it had been broadly inefficient and it was quite inequitable. We can say that again in certain elements it was informal also. There was again corruption, bribery, and all of that involved. So before 1991, we say that it was inefficient and it was quite inequitable. So these are two keywords. So international standards, because we talk about again structural reforms, the decade of 1990s. So we had to follow the international standards. So according to the international standards, if we look at the income tax rates in India, that they have been at a higher rate. So there was like no value added tax, VAT at the central level, except on a selective basis from the mid 1980s. So value added tax is again, we talked about value addition. So whatever amount in the form of value added is done in a raw material, as we calculate it by subtracting the final value minus the value or the monetary value of the raw material used. So the amount that we get after subtraction. On that also we had the value added tax. So this is the meaning of value added tax. Consumption based tax base, it was narrow in India at that point of time. Services also excluded from the tax base. So since we saw the services sector also saw proper growth after 1990s reforms. So at that point of time, we were not having such a defined or modern taxation system in India. There were complex exemptions. They were, again, we were not using technology. The system was not so transparent as we have it today. And selected export duties reduce the international competitiveness of the traditional exports also. So export duties were reduced and subnational level states sales taxes. So although today we do not have the sales tax and all that, because that now together it is collectively imposed in the form of GST. So here the problem, if I would say, that existed because of the multiple taxes, even single good was twice taxed. So that was a problem. So that cascading effect of taxation was done away with the implementation of GST. So changes in India's tax structure generally agreed to have led to improvements in the efficiency and the equity. And talk about developing countries, immediate reason for the tax reforms has been the need to enhance the revenue. So even when we talk about tax reforms, there are two things. So when we talk about, one is the tax base. So tax base is in terms of quantity, and second is, given the current tax base, how we can further increase the revenue. So this is efficiency and the quality aspect we talk about. So 1993 fiscal crisis has been proven to be the mother of tax reforms in India. So we can use this sentence also. In most cases, such reforms are not in the nature of the systemic improvements to enhance the long-run productivity of the tax system. Export-led open economy, tax system should not only raise necessary revenues to provide social, physical, environment, but also minimize the distortion also. So how we can reduce the inequality, how we can reduce the regressive taxation, how we can increase, like we have certain schemes also, like amnesty scheme is there for the people who have been involved in tax avoidance, or we can say specifically tax evasion to be precise. So they are provided certain incentives there that if you disclose and you file, there's certain amount of even penal tax rate that you'll have to file and pay. So you'll not be again, given a jail term or all of that. So this is also one of the way of improving the efficiency or increasing the tax revenue. So from this, we can start in the next video. So any doubts? Because here we covered majorly the historical evolution of taxation system in India.
What is the meaning of fiscal crisis here? Simple terms में.
Fiscal crisis यही है कि during many developing countries their immediate reason for tax reform fiscal crisis. So suppose fiscal crisis होती है, there is huge amount of fiscal deficit, बहुत ज्यादा high है, आप उसको manage नहीं कर पा रहे हो, तो उसकी वजह से जो फिजिकल क्राइसिस, या इवन जो, अगर हम बात करते हैं 2008 फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस की भी, तो उस टाइम पे रियलाइजेशन यही होता है कि द इम्पोर्टेंस ऑफ टैक्सेशन सिस्टम इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, प्लस इवन फिजिकल डेफिसिट में भी योर रिलायंस, आप कौन से सोर्स पे रिलाई कर रहे हो टू बोरो द मनी, वेदर इट इज एक्सटर्नली आप कंट्री के बाहर बोरो कर रहे हो या यू आर बोरोइंग फ्रॉम द डोमेस्टिक सोर्सेज. सो at that point of time you realize कि there are certain changes which are required, which is important to deal to fight back the fiscal crisis also. So we talk about the resilience को और कैसे हम strengthen कर सकते हैं. So this is simple meaning. Like 1997 में there was fiscal crisis and 2008-9 में there was global financial crisis. So that is the meaning. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us on Ansarkari, and do subscribe to the channel.